an ominous return. In the darkness of a raging storm, Marcus Wellington kicked aside debris to enter the centuries-old fortress that once belonged to his ancestors. Thunder boomed in the distance, as if the sky itself roared a warning. From the moment he crossed the threshold, Marcus sensed that something in these abandoned halls wanted him there, and would not let him leave until it claimed its due. The unsettling arrival. Lightning peeled back the night, revealing the ruined grandeur of Wellington Castle. Each flash etched leering gargoyles and shattered stone columns into Marcus's vision. Rain lashed like needles against his coat, but he pressed forward, recalling the final words of his dying father. No matter the cost, reclaim what belongs to our bloodline. We have been damned. Marcus, only you can break the curse. The notion of a curse felt surreal, until he laid eyes on the battered family crest carved into the throne at the far end of the entrance hall. Darkness seemed to coalesce around that single object, beckoning him closer. Uncertainty churned in his gut. Was he truly fulfilling a solemn family duty, or walking straight into a centuries-old trap? Yet he could not turn back. A promise made in the dead man's final hour pinned him to his course. As thunder rattled the ancient walls, Marcus whispered his first vow to the shadows. I will restore this place, even if it destroys me. Little did he know how quickly those words would begin to devour his heart. Ghosts of obligation. By morning, the storm's fury subsided, leaving a heavy fog over the courtyard. Marcus wound through corridors thick with dust and unseen presence. Portraits of forebears hung crookedly, their eyes seeming to follow him with tacit blame. He paused before a grand painting of his father, who had refused to speak of the castle until his final breath. Memories stung his father's trembling voice, urging him to fix the family's legacy, the echo of distant relatives who vanished once tragedy struck. Alone now, Marcus felt the old tales wrap around him like a noose. Tales of wealth and influence lost to time and negligence. Tales that suggested the Wellington line was cursed by something more than just misfortune. In a private study, he found a tarnished brass plate with the family motto, "Fortune favors the bold, but curses the unworthy." The words felt like a direct challenge. Were his ambitions noble enough, or would this place break him? As if sensing his turmoil, a gust of wind flung papers into the air. One letter, marked by his father's handwriting, warned ominously. Beware the counsel of those who share your blood. One among them conspires to seal our doom. Marcus's pulse quickened. Betrayal. He clenched his fists around the parchment, fresh determination flooding him. He would root out deceit and raise the castle from its ashes, ensuring prosperity for the villagers and justice for his family name. Still, a chill lingered in the back of his mind. What if the traitor was standing right beside him already? Embers of conspiracy. When the relatives and advisors arrived, drawn like moths to the flicker of renewed power. Marcus noticed their guarded expressions. Henry Caldwell, a soft-spoken cousin, offered a thin smile and words of support. Leonard, an older cousin with a perpetual smirk, kept checking his watch. Rosalind, knitting her gloved hands, cast uneasy glances around the courtyard as Marcus laid out his reconstruction plan. Repair the walls, re-establish the farmland, and reignite the family's once sterling reputation. He felt unease settle over the gathering. Their tepid applause reeked of hidden agendas. When the group dispersed, Henry lingered, gently gripping Marcus's shoulder. "Be careful," he whispered. "Every promise you make carries a price." The words felt heavy with prophecy. Glancing at the castle's battered facade, Marcus wondered if the structure itself awaited his downfall, whispering dire warnings in the midnight wind. A twisted pact. Later, while exploring a derelict corridor, Marcus sensed a presence behind him, a voice, low, persuasive, a code off the damp stone. He spun around to see a man in immaculate attire, hair slicked back with predatory grace. "Jacob Armitage," the stranger said, bowing with exaggerated flair. "I conducted business with your father. He owed me a favor. Perhaps you'd like to continue our arrangement." Marcus stiffened. He had never heard the name. "Why would I trust you?" Jacob's eyes gleamed in the torchlight. "You need resources, money, labor, and political sway. I have them. In return, you'll provide me special privileges once you've secured your position. Without my support, you'll failed." A surge of revulsion battled with cold pragmatism in Marcus's mind. The castle's coffers were nearly empty, the workforce uncertain. Jacob's offer was a lifeline, but a potentially lethal one. Despite the alarm bells screaming in his head, Marcus agreed to consider the arrangement, hoping to buy time. As Jacob disappeared into the gloom, Marcus felt a creeping sense that he had just unlocked a door that refused to shut, releasing something far more dangerous than he could imagine. Echoes in the night. Exhausted, Marcus dozed off by the waning hearth in the great hall. Nightmares pounced. He dreamt of a robed figure prowling the highest ramparts, chanting in a guttural language. His father's voice echoed, "One among you conspires, one among you conspires." Like a broken record, he woke with a jolt, heart drumming against his ribs. The sense of being watched lingered. Suddenly, he spotted a shadow moving at the edge of his vision. Bolting upright, he dashed after it down twisting hallways until he reached a sealed, iron, riveted door marked with a strange crest distinct from the Wellington insignia. He tried the handle. Locked. The door stood resolute, daring him to find the key. A bizarre mixture of dread and curiosity stirred within him. Was this locked chamber connected to the rumored curse, or a family secret left to fester? The fortress, it seemed, was riddled with hidden corridors and hidden betrayals, just waiting to be unearthed. Lost letters and lingering doubts. Dawn arrived with renewed tension. Workers began repairs on the outer walls, while Marcus couldn't shake the memory of that mysterious door. Henry approached with a bundle of sealed letters, some bearing the family crest, others marked with a coiled serpent around a sword. One letter read, "The ritual must be completed. Delay invites ruin. The bloodline demands sacrifice." Marcus's stomach twisted. Ritual. Was this the rumored curse his father spoke of? Another letter bore the initials J.A., Jacob Armitage. The lines implied clandestine dealings, referencing a final exchange that could alter the family's fate forever. When Henry asked what the letters contained, Marcus tucked them away. He sensed that trust was a precious commodity in this castle, and he couldn't squander it by revealing all he knew. Feeling the walls of secrecy closing in, he forced a reassuring nod, though his heart pounded with each passing moment. Crossroads of loyalty. By midday, frustration simmered. The villagers, long neglected by Wellington rule, were clamoring for relief. A small crowd gathered beyond the castle gates, demanding food and support. Inside, Marcus convened a tense council with his cousins and Jacob Armitage. Leonard insisted, "We must secure noble endorsements before wasting funds on peasant relief." Marcus seethed. "They're not peasants. They're our responsibility." Jacob chimed in, arching an eyebrow. "Perhaps we find a balance. Your obligations to power might come first if you want to hold onto that throne." Henry's voice trembled with quiet resolve. "Marcus, you alone must decide where your loyalty truly lies." Heat flushed Marcus's face. He recalled the cryptic note about a family traitor, one who could doom them all. And now Jacob's presence threatened to overshadow every moral intention. "Jaw tight," Marcus declared. "We will serve both, bring immediate relief to the villagers, and rebuild our status. I refuse to sacrifice the innocent for power." But tension fizzled like static in the air. Marcus sensed that each choice he made would either forge new alliances or spark hidden resentments. Unbeknownst to him, a darker drama was already unfolding behind shuttered doors. Page 8, True Secrets Beneath the Floorboards. That night, drawn by an inscrutable pull, Marcus returned to the locked door. While tracing his footsteps, he noticed an uneven section of the corridor's floor. Prying it open, he discovered a concealed compartment containing brittle pages covered in archaic symbols. By lantern glow, he deciphered enough to see references to a blood rite, a sacrificial ceremony tied to the rightful heir that promised to break a curse if completed correctly. Margin notes scrawled in what looked like his father's hand warned, "Fail the blood rite, and our line will wander in eternal ruin." A noise startled him. He quickly replaced the floorboard. Anxiety drilled into his mind. Had someone seen him? Something about the ritual, an unholy bond of blood and power, made his skin crawl. Despite the dread, a question consumed him. Was he the heir meant to perform this rite? Unsettling revelations. Unable to sleep, Marcus pored over the ancient texts. They described an altar, an oath, and a tragic sacrifice essential to restore the Wellington legacy. His father's margin notes practically bled panic and desperation. Seeking counsel, Marcus confided in Henry, sharing the texts. Henry read in silence, complexion draining. "This is madness," he whispered. "Wu cannot sacrifice a life just to lift some medieval curse. Marcus, these superstitions might have driven your father insane." Before Marcus could respond, a guard burst in. "Sir, the villagers are at the gates again, demanding rations." Guilt seized Marcus. He had promised them relief. Torn between the immediate crisis and the looming specter of an ancient ritual, he locked away the documents. The weight of multiple vows pressed down on him. His father's, the villagers', his hidden bargain with Jacob. Each vow threatened to unravel into cataclysm if he couldn't hold everything together. The boiling point. The courtyard churned with anger. Families pleaded for food, men demanded work. Children looked on with hollow eyes. Marcus raised his hands, voice cracking with urgency. "Repairs are underway. Rations will be distributed tomorrow." Hope shimmered momentarily until a lone voice shouted, "We're starving now. We can't wait for your endless promises." Marcus's soul twisted. He had no easy answers. The castle coffers were nearly bare. Yet in the crowd's fringe, he spotted Jacob Armitage, leaning against a broken column, smirking. He mouthed something Marcus couldn't quite decipher, but could feel a reminder that Jacob controlled the financial lifeline. Observing from a higher balcony, Leonard sneered and Rosalind clutched her gloves. Even the workers seemed paralyzed between loyalty to Marcus's cause and their own survival. A foreboding hush settled as the villagers left, uncertain whether to hope or despair. That night, Marcus sat in his father's study, staring at a half-finished letter. "My son, if you are reading this, I have failed to break our family's curse. Forgive me." He realized he might be hurtling down the same doomed path. Was there truly no escape? Web of deceptions. Despite the tension, some progress in restoration was made. But the finances were strangling them. Jacob's promise of funds seemed more distant each day. When Marcus confronted him about the delays, Jacob replied with a velvet smile. "You must sign over certain western provinces. Nothing substantial, just enough to secure your future." Henry fumed. "That land is Wellington territory. We cannot sell our birthright for a bag of gold." Jacob leaned in, eyes cold. "Birthright means nothing if you starve." In the swirl of accusations that followed, Leonard and Rosalind burst in, accusing Marcus of leading them to financial ruin. Marcus's voice cracked. "I'm trying to save our name." But behind every heated word, he felt the fortress's watchful eyes, the echo of the blood rite pulsing in his mind. Maybe the ritual was the only solution. Perhaps fate demanded blood for salvation. Each argument drew him closer to an unsettling conclusion. Nothing would be restored without a profound and possibly horrifying sacrifice. the turning point. Determined to rally morale, Marcus decided to unveil part of the newly restored throne room. Tattered tapestries were rehung, rubble cleared from the marble floors. He addressed a modest gathering, family, workers, a few villagers, beneath flickering torches. "Look," he said, resting a hand on the colossal throne. "We are rebuilding. This is but the first step. We shall restore the Wellington name and bring prosperity back to these lands." A smattering of applause ensued, hollow yet hopeful. Jacob, lurking at the edge, gave Marcus a piercing look, as if to say, "Remember our contract." Leonard's face twisted, jealousy etched in every line. Rosalind shuffled her feet, her glance darting among them all. Henry stood quietly by, worry etched on his brow. Once the crowd dispersed, an old steward passed behind Marcus, whispering, "A throne can be a lonely place when one's soul is forfeit." Then he vanished, those words wrapped around Marcus's heart like a vice, leaving him to wonder if the grandeur he so desperately sought would merely cage him in. Night of shadows, unable to quell his obsession, Marcus returned to the locked door in the west wing, this time armed with a ring of old keys. He tested each until one clicked. Inside, he found a hidden chapel lit by moonlight filtering through thin windows. Stone pillars bore carved runes, and at the far end stood an altar stained dark brown, the residue of ancient blood. He realized with mounting horror, a battered tomb on the altar described the blood rite in chilling detail. The rightful heir must spill blood within these walls to bind the family's power and break the centuries' old curse. His father's frantic scribbles lined the margins, concluding, "Only blood will satisfy the fortress and the darkness that guards it." Marcus stumbled backward, revulsion churning in his stomach. Was his father's final command, urging him to commit this atrocity? He felt as though hands from the past reached out to tether him to this altar. Then a soft scuff of boots. Henry stood in the doorway, face pale with shock. "My God, Marcus," he breathed, staring at the blood-stained altar. "We can't do this." They left together, shadows trailing them, both aware that they had crossed a threshold. No matter how they tried to deny it, the fortress and its unspeakable demands clung to them like a living thing. The final choice. By dawn, rumors spread that Marcus would deliver a momentous address. Storm clouds gathered ominously as villagers, relatives, and Jacob's armed men convened in the newly cleared throne room. Leonard and Rosalind, grim-faced, stood at the back. Henry hovered near Marcus, tension radiating from him like heat from a furnace. Marcus climbed the dais, gazing at his bloodline's crest etched into the throne. He remembered every vow to restore the castle, to help the villagers, to avenge his father's legacy, and to break the curse. A single choice loomed, a choice that could unify or destroy everything. Voice trembling, he began, "There is an ancient duty attached to this family, a curse, if you will, that has haunted us for generations. My father believed a blood rite was the only way to end it. Gasps rippled through the throng. Jacob's eyes narrowed. Leonard sneered in disbelief. Rosalind turned pale, as if she had suspected, but never dared to voice it. Henry's face contorted with raw worry. Marcus continued. To restore Wellington's name and lift our burdens, blood must be spilt. But I will not slaughter an innocent. I reject this monstrous tradition. A communal hush followed, as if the fortress itself was holding its breath. Jacob stepped forward, the edges of his mouth curling. Then you reject your rightful seat. Stand down and let me, an associate of your father, take what's owed to me. He snapped his fingers. Armed men advanced. Your future is lost without me. Henry lunged protectively toward Marcus. Swords were drawn, torches flickered wildly, and panic seized the room. The price of the throne. Lightning blazed through the stained glass windows, illuminating the throne room in blue, white flashes. Jacob's men stormed the dais, weapons clanging against the defenders. Marcus, cornered, felt the dagger from the hidden chapel press against his hip. In the chaotic swirl, he plunged it into the side of an advancing attacker. The man collapsed in a spray of blood on the altar, like days. The single drop that awakened the fortress. In a blinding pulse, the runes carved into the ancient walls flared with sudden light, as if the castle itself gasped to life. A thunderous groan rumbled through the foundation, toppling a statue onto Jacob's soldiers. The air grew thick and electric. A swirl of unimaginable force spiraled around Marcus, enveloping him in a cold aura. Screams filled the hall. Bodies hit the floor. Henry cowered behind a column, calling Marcus's name. Even Jacob's men froze in terror, eyes wide as the tapestries whipped in a supernatural gale. Then, with a final roar, the swirling force coalesced and receded into the dagger's hilt, leaving a dreadful silence. Panting, Marcus found himself seated on the throne, the dagger's blade still dripping. His father's voice echoed in his mind. "One we have been damned. Only you can break the curse." Suddenly, Rosalind stepped forward from the trembling crowd, face contorted in heartbreak. She tore off her gloves, revealing a serpent and sword tattoo on her wrist, the same emblem as the chapel. "I tried to prevent this," she wept. "The right demands a life from the rightful heir's blood. I volunteered myself, but Jacob forced my hand. He threatened to slaughter the villagers if we didn't allow him a foothold." In that instant, all the parallel lines converge. Jacob had been pulling strings to force the right, hoping to harvest the castle's dark power for himself. Rosalind had known fragments of the ritual and tried to sabotage it from the inside, fueling the tension while avoiding open conflict. Leonard had sought to discredit Marcus, believing a different heir might claim the throne without bloodshed. Henry, oblivious to the deeper conspiracies, had tried only to protect Marcus and the family name. Amidst the devastation, a final paradox crystallized. The blood rite had indeed been performed, blood was spilled during a confrontation sparked by betrayal and desperation. Marcus felt the fortress's presence in his veins, an unholy link forging him into the new pillar of Wellington's cursed legacy. Tears burned his eyes as he realized the curse might be broken in name, but the cost was unspeakable. Innocent blood had still been shed. The swirling energy that nearly destroyed them also bound Marcus to the throne. A hush settled over the hall. The villagers, the soldiers, the relatives, they all stared at the new Lord of Wellington, crowned by violence and overshadowed by guilt. In a shuddering epilogue, the storm outside died, replaced by an eerie stillness. Wind sighed through shattered windows, as if the castle itself were exhaling a final breath of darkness. Marcus, dagger in hand, locked eyes with Henry, who asked in a broken whisper, "Marcus, what have we done?" Marcus could only shake his head, tears cutting tracks through the grime on his face. He had vanquished the threat of an external curse, only to inherit the fortress's dark heart. The villagers might now see relief. The family might regain its stature. But the throne had become his prison, an inherited wound that might never fully heal. Surrounded by the ruin of so many dreams, Marcus rose and spoke one last vow, his voice eerily calm. "I will lead as best I can, but some demons can't be exorcised. They can only be carried." And thus, he joined the ranks of his haunted lineage, keeper of the castle's secrets, chained to a legacy that demanded both his blood and his soul. Moral and reflection, Marcus's odyssey through his ancestral fortress is a stark exploration of how ambition, secrecy, and desperation form a trifecta that can bind us more tightly than any literal curse. Each promise he made to restore the family name, to uplift the villagers, to honor his father's dying wish, became a thread in a larger web of moral compromise and unseen consequences. The blood right in this story symbolizes the deepest recesses of our own psyches, the lengths we might go to right old wrongs or secure new power. Marcus's biggest realization arrives too late, that merely breaking a curse does not absolve one of the darkness unleashed in the process. Even when the external threat dissipates, the internal turmoil, guilt, and isolation remain. The twisted synergy of betrayal and loyalty, exemplified by Henry's devotion and Rosalind's hidden knowledge, exposes how well-meaning individuals can still become pawns in a larger design. Historical sins do not vanish simply because we refuse to believe in them. They fester until forced into the light, often demanding a horrifying payment. By the final page, Marcus sits on the throne he so desperately chased, only to discover true leadership demands more than blood. It demands the willingness to carry the burden of collective guilt, an unending atonement for the devils once unleashed. The tension between heritage and individual conscience resonates far beyond the castle walls, urging us all to confront the hidden rooms within our own histories and hearts.